Hello, hello everyone, and welcome to today's show. Okay, so today we're going to ask our guest panelists for a moment of transparency, right? Everyone may not have shared these experiences, so, we understand if there's a lack of empathy, but we want everyone to kind of listen in and hear what we have to say about we're dealing with being raised by family members or being adopted, right? And even if it wasn't a legal adoption, we're talking about experiences shared when you live outside of your home, right? And Munjan, I want to begin, just share a little bit about your early life, right? And how did your grandmother or grandparents talk to you about the situation? Like, why were you there as opposed to your siblings? And what did you remember feeling when you first learned that, you're in one house and your siblings were somewhere else?
Wow,
That's a lot, right?
a lot.
So where do you want to start?
Who are you referring to it, Mr. Mitchell?
To you.
Oh, to me, wow. Ooh. Wow. First off, times has really changed now. So back in the day, you could just, if you weren't financially secured, or you didn't have the accommodation to actually rear a kid. And my situation, I will never know what my full extent of why I was over at my grandmother's house. For a short period of my life, I thought my uncle and my aunties were my actual biological until I started spending the summers with my actual biological mom and dad. My grandparents were the best parents I could ever have. Instilled discipline. They weren't highly educated people, so as time revolved, I know I couldn't do without having an education of my own. So, but when you look at how life came, how my life turned out, it's the best thing that could ever happen to me. I love my mom's. I'll never be able to find out now why she gave me away. She's older and she suffers from dementia. So it's a subject that if it comes up, it'll be so unfair to her because some days I leave my mother's house after bathing and washing her. She doesn't even know who I am half the time. So, and I do a statistic across the board. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke. And all my brothers do either or.
Hmm.
I could have took a negative path and became a horrible person just because of I thought my some other than me, one of my other brothers should have been given away to my grandmother because I could never understand the philosophy of you have three kids, you gave the fourth one away, and you had two more kids. So I never let the fact that with me being given away was a bad point. Taking nothing away from my mom, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. None of my brothers who my mom reared comes to see her, care about her well-being. So to me, it's a blessing how God has me with such a beautiful relationship with my mom now, even though she's not coherent to reciprocate what I'm giving her now, but it's it's a heartwarming thing to know that my situation turned out for the better.
Let me ask you a
Um,
question. Did you
mhm.
ever speak to your grandmother about the situation? Like, why am I here? How did I, end up here or anything like that?
My grandmother was not an educated woman, but she was very smart. When I say smart, I mean well, a lot of us who are educated don't have common sense, don't have sense of saying, if I say this, how is this going to affect that child? So my grandmother was very protective of me. She never spoke ill will when it came to my mom, but we had numerous discussions on, yeah, she brought you here, but you're my child. And she always protect me on going down that path of why I was here. Just know now that I got you. My grandmother always had me believe that. Believe it or not, my mom and my dad lived walking distance from the high school, and they didn't even come to graduation. My grandmother was there though, so I got so many things I could take to a negative, but my grandmother kept my head on right. You know,
Oh, you
end
did
up buying her.
not come to your graduation.
Didn't even come to graduation, and walking distance now. Yeah.
Mm.
So, what was of value to my parents wasn't education, and they believed in hard work. They didn't believe in you have to go through the educational system to be competitive. Now we know we have to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
But you looking back in the day now, you know. So I think I'll leave this earth not knowing why, if I answered your question, Mr. Mitchell, on why I felt, do me and my grandmother ever discussed why I was there. So, and right now today with my mom suffering from the disease she suffers from, I'll never know. But I'm grateful that I always told myself God gave me two mothers, and I've lost one of them now at 97 years old. My grandmother left her here at 97 years old. So, and I still have a mother. So that's my testimony of God giving me two mothers.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something that our situations are somewhat similar, but for me, it
Mm-hmm.
happened when I was older. So my parents, well, first my dad got into some trouble and he went away. So I had to live with my grandparents. But, we were together, my siblings and I, my mom, we lived with my grandparents. And when my dad came home, we moved back in the house briefly. And then my parents got into an altercation. My mom was like, no, I'm leaving. And my grandfather was like, hey, you can't come back here. Those are his words. He said, you can't come back here. He said, you have a house. That's your husband. You and those kids need to go back there. Y'all need to figure it out. You need to work things out. So my mom was like, this man put his hands on me. I'm not going back. I'm not doing that. So we moved in with one of my grand aunts, my grandmother's sister. And that was weird because we went from living in a home where we had our own rooms. My sister had a room, my brother and I shared a room, to the four of us sleeping in one bedroom at my grand aunt's house. So it was me, my sister, my brother. I was in kindergarten. They were in fifth and sixth grade, and my mom. And we were living at my auntie's house, grand aunt's house. And to accommodate one of my grandmother's other sisters was like, Eric, my older brother, they said, Eric can come with us. So that was weird to me. But remember, I'm in kindergarten. So my brother lived down the street from us. Yeah. So that was weird. We lived with my Aunt Ola, and Eric lived with our Aunt Bernice by St. Luke Church. So, having to move there in the middle of the year, we didn't have a bus. We're kids. We don't know who we had to speak to about coordinating transportation. And some mornings, my sister and I would just sit out and try to stop the school bus. If they didn't stop, I remember walking, man. My sister was in the sixth grade and I was in kindergarten, and we walked to the school. And I remember walking past my aunt's house, knowing where my brother lived, which was weird to me. And this went on for a couple of months. And then we moved back to our home together. We were all in the home together. And of course, my mom left and went to Boston. So it was always like musical chairs. I think my brother went first, and then he came back, and my sister and I went together. And I think that time when my aunt pulled him away from us, it
Mm-hmm.
did something to him because he felt like he was like, I don't know what it was, but he was okay with not staying with my sister and I.
Mm.
And I'm trying to remember if we ever all lived together after that. But my sister and I stayed in Boston together, and then she came back, and I stayed alone for a while. And then I came back like one summer until Christmas, and my brother and I went back together, and then he left and came back, and I was there. So we had a lot of, living together, living alone, being together, being apart. And when I got to high school, my dad was battling substance abuse, and his brother,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly how it came about, but my auntie, my uncle's wife, asked if I wanted to stay with them. She said she think it would be better. I needed some stability, and it changed my life. It built my self confidence because now, for years when my dad battled substance abuse, we didn't have a home phone. Some days we didn't have electricity. And,
Mm.
in the country where you have to deal with a water pump from the well, if you don't have electricity,
It's a wrap.
you don't have any water pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have any hot water. So I moved in with them, and now I have a home. I have a, home phone. We have electricity. My uncle had a pretty good job working for the railroad, but I always, well, my brother was off in college and my sister lived next door. But those 2 years that I lived with them, I never had like a Christmas dinner with my siblings.
Mm.
Yeah, Thanksgiving dinner with my siblings. And I knew why I was there, I knew why I was there. I understood. And then the next year, my dad went to a rehab, and my aunt called, and I thought she wanted me to come back to live with her again. But she said, your dad went to a rehab, and when he gets out this time, he's going to need your support. Are you willing to come?
Mm.
I want you to come and live with him. And I live with,
Mm.
at this point, my sister had 3 kids. So it was me, my sister, her 3 kids, and my dad living in a little small, I don't know how many square feet. I mean, really small. It's less than 1,000 square feet total, like a mini home. And my sister and the kids were in one room. My dad had the other room. I slept on the couch. And like on the weekends, but if he was gone, I would go and lay in the bed. So I got to lay in the bed on Saturdays.
Mm.
But I think back to how it can affect you and your identity. So my friends from high school, female friends, we laugh about it now, and they accuse me
Mm-hmm.
of being conceited.
Mm-hmm.
And because they said I didn't speak to girls that liked me, or I wouldn't, invite anybody over, but I can't invite you over with the living conditions that I had. I didn't ask for numbers because I didn't have a telephone. I didn't have a
Mm.
home phone. So I can understand
Mm.
how living conditions can have an impact on, your self-esteem and, how you converse with others. I was limited on my participation with sports when my dad was battling his substance issues because I couldn't afford cleats. I wanted to play
Mm.
football. I knew I could play. I was a decent athlete, but my dad didn't have a car. I didn't have a way to get to and from practice. I didn't have money for cleats. So I couldn't participate in certain things.
Mm.
And I think back on, and again, something that you said, I don't drink. I don't do drugs, you know, but I saw firsthand what happens, I
Mm.
witnessed a lot being around my dad while he battled his substance issues. So I made a conscious decision to never do those things. Like I'm not perfect, far from it, but I know that, I'm like, I'm never ever going to do those things. And being in that environment taught me a lot. And Also living with my uncle, I think taught me a lot as well. Seeing him, go to work every day and understanding what an unconditional marriage was like. Because no matter what, they could have argued, but no matter what, when my uncle got up for work, my auntie had his meal prepped. It wasn't any Tupperware back then like that. It was a plate wrapped in aluminum foil with his soda wrapped in foil, and he made his meal, and he handled his priorities as well. But one of the questions I want to ask you, if you could send a message to your younger self about, navigating that space where you had to live with your grandmother, if you could send a message to your younger self, what would you say?
Wow. That's a deep question. Wow. Takes a village. And I know now that would be short and sweet. It took a village, and I know now. I picture my younger self a lot being by myself, having an uncle to teach me how to drive. So I'd, I'd say it take a village. I'd tell my younger self would be locked in on not why my mom gave me away, or not why I didn't have, not why I didn't have a lot of things that I thought I should have. It took a village, and it made me strong. So my strength, my younger self, I wish my younger self would have known what I was going through now. It would pay off in the end, instead of me feeling sorry about being given away. So there'll be some of the things I try to break down to my younger self. It takes a village. And I didn't know that at the time, but to anyone who goes remotely close to what I've been to,
Mm-hmm.
mhm, close to what I've been to, I tell anyone that sometimes it may not be the way we want it to be, circumstances meaning, but you have to, in order to persevere, you have to hang in there, because it's so easy to get off on a negative track, especially if something you spoke in reference to peer pressure and just dating, or just having someone to where you feel you're equal to that person. But in reality, you don't have a phone. You don't. I tell my younger self, just hang in there, just hang in there. And just my strength got me through. I could have been, I could have been the biggest drug head right now. Could have been the biggest drug dealer. Hmm.
And what does family mean to you?
Wow. Every year, every year, the dynamics change. So, mhm. Every year the dynamics change. So, what that individual you may view it as family, and then 5 years later, you find out family is more worse than a guy you met. Like right now, Cole, Mr. Mitchell. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know nothing I wouldn't do for you, and I know some people, family wise, I stay a distance. Family, they get a pass. For some reason, family get a pass because we are taught God gave us God gave us family. You choose your friends, so they get a pass. They shouldn't get one, but they get a pass. So family to me is, I evaluate individuals. I don't just say, hey, we're family. I make, from family to friends. I make them earn the right for me to have that trust. But some folks, family, they do for family before they'll even do for themselves. And that ain't cool. So family to me means you got to earn it. Your blood don't earn it. Having the same blood doesn't give you the right to abuse me. Having the same blood doesn't give you the right for me to do without so you can have. I make them earn them. I make you earn it.
Mm. I
It's
was
kind of harsh
at
to.
a funeral one day,
Uh-huh.
and the guy said, this pastor, he said, you can be related in one of two ways. He said you can be related by blood or by love.
Yeah.
And I always thought about that. I felt like family is like, um, If I love you as family, you're my family.
Mm-hmm.
And because you can have like biological family members that you've never met.
That's true.
You can have people that grew up with you as a biological family member, but they're not somebody's child, you know?
That's true.
But it made me change. I want to ask you this. What impact did your upbringing have on your relationship with your children?
First of all, even when I didn't want to go to church, I got I got whipped to know the seriousness of having God in everything you do. So with my kids, when I say the dynamics change, you know, kids are being reared by computers now. Christmas, you don't even see kids outside playing with the toys Christmas now.
Mm,
Mr. Mitchell, we made bikes from a choir and a tire back in just a frame from someone else throughout the years. I've never had a brand new bike until I became grown, bought a motorcycle. So to view when in the essence of rearing my kids are taught now that if they have a valid point, they can stand up to a mom or a dad. See, when I was coming up, I could be right. I could went through the Supreme Court justice and could have been right, but I couldn't take my right to my dad because I'm punched in the mouth.
mm,
So, so saying that tells me my kids, I let them know that I go to the scripture all the time. When you honor mother and father, your days will be long upon the land. So the conscience, I deal with my kids to the conscience now because they're grown now. They're not babies. So you could say something to me as a friend, as a little brother,
hmm
and I can battle you back and forth. But when you leave my presence, my ride home,
hmm
that's a ride home, everything short of heaven, which is hell. Knowing you were right, but I just wasn't man enough to accept the fact that you were right. So rearing kids these days, we are so we fool ourselves by thinking we could use the same virtues and the same values that we were brought up on. You can't do that. We are judged now on credit scores and what you have in your savings. See, back in the day, we were hard work, respect got you where money would never take you.
Is all right, how we were valued. I want to take a
Yeah,
minute to invite, we have some new callers and welcome Miss London, Deborah, welcome. You all are available. You can have a seat. And I want to get you all caught up on what we're discussing now. We're just talking about displaced children, speaking up now, adults that were displaced as children. If you were adopted, raised by a family member, or whatever the case may be, just sharing those experiences is what we're doing right now. And to get you all caught up, our caller, Franklin, he's talking about being raised by his grandmother. But in his case, he said the thing that stood out to him the most was he was the fourth son out of six. He said his mom had three boys, had him, and then he had two younger brothers. And one brother is less than a year younger than he is, or maybe a year younger. And he was raised by his grandmother while the other five boys were at home with his parents, and he shared those experiences, you know. And I too talked about living with my uncle and grandparents and things like that. And I think that for the most part, our parents looked at what things were most valuable to us as far as our development. What things were the most valuable and where can those things be provided to us? So if that stability of a home was more valuable than the intimacy of being with family, then hey, he needs to stay with a family member that can provide a home, a roof, lights, hot water. You know, I think that in some instances, kids feel like, you know what? I mean, that may seem to be important, but I would rather be with you. I'd rather be with my parent. Oh, hey, Deborah. Deborah says she's at a party, so she's just checking in to listen. Okay, thank you, Deborah. And Liv is here as well. London is here. We have JMS. Welcome, everybody. Oh, London, please chime in. We would like to hear your story. London typed in. She says she is a displaced adult. We would like to hear what you have to say, London. And you know our motto, we listen, we do not judge. We're here to listen, learn, understand, and grow. And like I said, a topic like this is unique in a sense. So we don't have a lot of, I mean, people can express sympathy, but if they can't empathize, they never really dealt with it or been through that. I want to ask you this, Franklin. Did you
Mm-hmm.
have a bit of like anxiety? Well, see, you went with your grandmother when you were young. For me,
Mm-hmm.
I was an adult, so I had some anxiety because at the end of the day, I knew that this was not my home. This was my uncle. This is my auntie, right? So it's not my house. Did you ever, did you ever feel that?
I never felt that way. I never felt that way. Reason because I felt my grandmother was my actual mother until I started putting my pieces together. So I never got a chance to experience that. My uncles were my big brothers. Anything I needed to be taught as a young man, they taught me. So I never got a chance to sit back and just feel like I should be where my brothers are. Because during the summer, I went and I visit. And when it came time, school would come back around, I went back to my grandmother's. So I watched the drugs, I watched the drinking, and I never became a part of that. So, question you asked earlier in reference to my younger self, how would I speak to him now? And the only thing would be to me, I'd tell my younger self is that what don't make you, what, it made me strong. That made me strong watching that. It's something that would make a weak man, a woman cry. I wonder why my mom gave me away at 3 months. And I'll never know that now. And from you knowing me a while, you know I won't know that now because out of all my brothers, none of them, they rarely visit. They rarely visit.
And like you say, your grandmother's deceased, but you can't speak to your grandmother.
Yes. And then they rarely come by and see my mom. So m- my adult person would tell my younger person, God was prepping you up for a reason. I get to learn, I get to have a brand new relationship with my mom all over, even though she has dementia. I get to know her. She doesn't even know who I am sometimes. So I know I'll never get questions answered. When she was in her right mind, I was too afraid to ask her because I was too afraid of what the answer was going to be.
Mm.
I was just caught up in the moment of, I love you and I really don't care. But God show you proof that I wasn't at I didn't get out of all my brothers. I didn't get sent to my grandmother's house by myself. God said, I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to be there with you. So I look back now and I look at all my brothers. Everybody has some type of substance abuse going on. And I didn't pick up none of them habits. I found education had to be a way out for me. I found having a career had to be a way out for me. See, kids are not being reared on how you and I were reared back in the day because they have different things. And you see the kids in the house playing with computers now. It's a rarity that you see a kid showing off his new bike outside.
I think nowadays the kids have a sense of entitlement, right? So they feel like
Yeah,
everything is going to be given to them anyway.
yeah.
And we were taught that nothing was going to be given to us and we had to work, we had to work hard for everything and appreciate things as well.
That's why they have not to cut you off, but that's why we have a problem with obesity now, diabetics. Kids are coming up with high blood pressure at 8 years old, 9 years old, because their lifestyle has changed. Oh, if we weren't buying our own school clothes in eighth and ninth grade by doing all those summer jobs, we weren't doing nothing.
Right.
You know, so it's a I could have took a lot of my upbringing and made a living hell to everybody I dealt with, even in relationships. Believe it or not, follows in relationships because you always looking for the abandonment. When are you going to get rid of me? When are you going to abandon me? So if you're not careful, you bring that in relationships too.
You made a good point. I want to ask a couple other questions to you. This is, and if it's something that you don't feel comfortable discussing, that's fine. You know, but London, I know you said you're here to listen. We just want to hear a different perspective about being, displaced. Um, and I'm thinking about my experiences. And one thing I can remember is worrying about my dad a lot. When I lived with my uncle during the holidays, like right now, I worried about my dad a lot. And I would actually like fix an extra plate and take it over to him because my dad lived next door. I didn't know when he would be there from when he wasn't, but he knew that I was safe with his brother. But I always worried about him. Like, where is he? Is he out tonight somewhere? Is he safe? Is someone going to try to harm him? So I did have a lot of anxiety when I wasn't with my dad. I worried about him more than I worried about my mother because my mom was with her parents. She was protected. My grandfather owned a store. He had a nice home. So I never worried about her, financially, if she's eating or things like that. I miss my mom. So, you know, every other weekend or so I would go down and spend the weekend with her. A couple nights over break, I would spend time with her. But I did have a lot of anxiety worried about my dad. How did you feel when you found out about your brothers, right? How did you feel about them? As far as, did you ever like find yourself worrying about what they're doing or thought that you were maybe missing out? Like they're having fun and I'm not having fun. They have toys and I don't have it, like things like that. How did you
That
feel not being there with them?
is that to that's our sister London.
Yes. Yeah, that's with London from our breakfast brunch. Yeah, munching.
Yeah,
My question is,
yeah.
with you not being in the house with your brothers, did you find yourself like worried about them and their well-being, if they're okay, or like thinking they were having fun or enjoying things without you?
I did. Ain't no need to lie. I did. And then something you said that was very smart, like usual, like you normally are. Something you said that really resonates. Regardless of if someone's doing, if the parent is doing good or bad, rich or poor, just them being there together with their mom and dad, I had this thing about I should have been there, regardless. But what drives me is that I know what I didn't have as a child,
Mm-hmm.
I made up real good as an adult. So it's just one of them things that say, well, your beginning don't have to be your ending, and that's how I focus my life right now.
Oh, that's a good
You know,
message for your younger self.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah,
message to tell your younger self that.
yeah. You know. And then when I say into relationships, I have my wife to come in and get to know me, and get to know my brothers and get to know my mother. And as a uplifting sometimes when I'm feeling wow, I'm all by myself, she lets me know, she tells me this all the time. She says, you know what? I know you love your grandmother, I know you love your mother, but that was one of the best things that could happen to you in your life. So it brings into full motion of, it's just not in me to hate the world from how I started off. Even a guy participating in the Olympics. Who cares who get out the box first?
That's how you finish the race.
How you finish?
I
How
want to
you
say
finish?
something and this is kind of personal, and to give our listeners some background. Frank is like my big brother, my very first friend. I don't even call Fast a friend. I call him a brother. We started preschool together, and Franklin is his big cousin. And when Frank came home from the military, we hooked up and jailed instantly. My older sister introduced us at a basketball game, and we jailed immediately. But situation happened where Franklin's baby brother, when he was some years ahead of me in school also, but I always looked at them as family. But Frank and I developed a friendship, a bond. I had a key to his house. I could borrow his car, do whatever. He could, and his brother made a comment one day about our bond and our relationship. And I thought it was joking at first. And then he started cussing and he was like, yeah, y'all such and such, comparing our looks to his and making these comments. And I thought about, I didn't respond in a negative way. I just laughed it off. And what I thought about, Frank, is how you were thinking that they're at home with the parents having a good time. And subconsciously, he probably felt like you had a better life than he did. Because like you said, your brothers were all in the home, right? And I don't know the age gap. What's the age gap between the oldest and youngest?
Woo! You, man. From the oldest to the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, like a 10-year gap.
10 year, okay.
Yeah, 10-year gap.
So that's not bad. So they would have
Yeah.
memories of being in the home with each other. So they probably felt like you had it better because there are 5 boys in the house together. And you get to
Probably.
enjoy, and I think about that. I never thought about it when I was going through it, but that's something for me to think about now. You know, did my family members perceive me living with and my uncle, like I said, he had a good job, he had a nice home, and we joke about it now. My cousins and I joke about who's the favorite. And I'm like, everybody knows I'm the favorite nephew, I'm the only one that lived in the house, right? Like it was a rite of passage or a great thing. But and it was a great thing because of where I was prior to living with them. I'd been through a lot, had been dealing with a lot, and it changed everything about me in a positive way. I started to excel in school. I started to excel academically, socially, regain a lot of self confidence, and it means a lot because it relieved a lot of anxiety that I held prior to. Because it's hard. It's hard. The years I lived with my dad, and like I said, we went through some hard times, man. Can you imagine being 12 years old, you don't know if your dad is even going to be home when you come home, or if he's going to be locked up. And if he is locked up, I don't want to tell anybody because I don't want to get taken away, right? So I'm fending for myself. I'm fending for myself as a 12-year-old, and I could figure things out. And I realized that my assistant principal at the middle school and my dad were frat brothers. So once we discovered that, any minor infraction, tardies and things like that, he would give me lunch detention. So I went to class tardy every single day. And it got to the point where I didn't even go to him to get the referral. I just went and had lunch detention. I told him that he gave me lunch detention for the remainder of the school year. But I wanted lunch detention because once I folded the tables and mopped the floor, I got all the leftover food in the cafeteria. And that was my last meal because I didn't know if my dad was going to even be home when I got out of school. And that was how I ate. So again, living with my uncle relieved all of that anxiety. So I dealt with being displaced, but I also dealt with a sense of security. So I guess there are pros and cons to both situations.
It is. It is. It is.
Our listeners today, and I know that they don't have those experiences, and I again thank you. We have other callers that chimed in. I want to thank all of you for being here, and please share the podcast. Thank you, London, for sharing the live show. But London, if you don't want to speak, at least type it up. I want to hear more about your experience. You said you're a displaced adult. And Deborah, if you can't speak, at least type what you all would like to know or say so I can read it out to our listeners. Have you had any similar experiences where you were displaced or living with a family member or even parents through a divorce? You know, what was that experience like? Living with one parent, living with the other, dealing with the questions. I remember my mom picking me up on Sundays and she wanted to know, what did we eat? Where did he take me? Da, 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 like all these questions being drilled. What was that experience like?
Hmm.
And I guess this is a deep topic today. Typically everybody's chiming in or, you know, sharing experiences are different things. And I have other questions for you, Munjan, when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
I have some other questions for you when you're ready.
I'm Lima Charlie. I'm Lima Charlie.
Okay. Can you share the first time you felt proud of overcoming your living rate?
Wow. This is sad to say, but I can remember the day I went into the military. My grandmother and my uncle dropped me off to the airport. When I got out of training, they assigned me to my own room, and that's when I felt I've made it. You know, I didn't have my uncle at the foot of the bed, or me at the head of the bed rotating, well, sleeping space because of the house was so small.
Mm.
You know, I was so small. I mean, my uncle slept in the same bed, like, you know, and right now today, he's my mentor, my idol, and now he's, went so far back, is like, and he taught me a lot of stuff. So it's like, I rotate it now, and I give him, I give him what he's given me when he was when he was in the right mind to teach me. Now the situation has reversed to where I pull him aside and I'll talk to him. But I can say something my grandmother told me. The last thing she said before she put me before they I got out of my grandfather had a little Chevy S10.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting in the middle, and our white folks, how they ride, where everybody's in a small truck, everybody's right next to each other, like 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 Mexicans. And I was right up to my grandmother. My grandmother told me, she called me, my nickname was Red. She said, Red, let me tell you something. She said, you ever find yourself in a peer group and you're the smartest in that peer group,
Mm-hmm.
leave that group immediately. And she never broke it down on what she was talking about until probably 10 years later. And I found out what she was saying. She said, you don't want to be involved with nothing that's not going to elevate you.
Right.
If you're the smartest, that means you're the smartest, you're going to stop right there.
Right.
You're going to think you know everything. So you always want to be in a peer group with folks that everybody have a individuality of teaching. But it's one of the last things I remembered that she told me. I think growing up in a home other than a biological, it touched on every part of your life. It touches on everything. How you view people, how you think sooner or later everyone's going to leave you, how you don't want to give, how you don't want to give 100 to everything you do when it comes to a relationship. You think no one's deserving of it. So it's come a time in your life, you're going to meet that genuine person to where you're going to have to break down and you're going to have to just put it all on the table. Hey, look, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to make you feel less than a man. You have to meet that person that'll have you lay that down. Until you do that, you always go back into feeling sorry, feeling like trash, garbage, like you've been given away. And right now, and I didn't face any of these things, but you could go deeper in reference to, you have young ladies now where they're being given to Uncle grandparents or whatever, and then you got uncles and brothers around, and they're being molested. So I didn't go through that. So there's always a saying where he said, no matter what you're going through, there's somebody going through a little bit more than what you're going through. So be grateful of how you come out of your situation, because someone's still in theirs. So I'm just grateful, Mr. Mitchell, that I'm able to give back now in every way I can. That's why I love being around kids. Give back, you know, as a respect level.
Let me ask.
My mom,
Quick question. If you knew of someone that's about to like raise a family member or adopt a child or, just step up to help out, say, hey, this kid can come with me or we'll take care of them. What is something that you would want to share with that person that they were about to take on the responsibility of raising someone else's child?
if you're not going to treat that child as if they were your own, leave them here.
Mm.
Because if you don't show that child, if you show that child that it's about and sometimes it'd be to a financial gain. Folks get paid to have kids that are not theirs in their home. So my only thing was, if you're not going to show that child that you're going to love them as if they were your own child, just leave them where they're at. They're better off, because you know how it feels to have someone that you look up to as a mother or father or auntie or uncle, and they treating their biological, or they treating someone that little close a little different. You have to have a special person to take on that. My grandmother was a special person. When it was time for me to get my behind whooped, I got my behind whooped. And she sat me down and said, Red, she started off by saying it's going to hurt her more than it's going to hurt me. But I'm like, how could it? How could you? And you made me go and get my own switch. So it has to be a special person. God's going to protect you regardless, but there's some kids around here that are so damaged from being sent to a family member, a close member of the family, and they got done so wrong. That didn't happen to me. I piggyback on what my wife says sometimes. I think one of the best things, not taking anything from my mom or my dad, but that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Being sent at 3 months to live with my grandmother. There's no way around having someone now who's taking someone in their home and you giving them the bare minimum that's required. Place to stay, something to eat, clothes on their back. You're doing the bare minimum. You should have left that child where they're at. So that would be my only thing to a child, or just doubt who's, a
I,
doubt to a doubt.
that's taking that on. I read, this was several years ago, probably maybe 10 years ago. I was doing a lot of research on children and, the mistreatment of children. There was a debate on corporal punishment in schools and the impact of medicinal treatments and, medicating kids for different issues. And then they talked about mistreatment of children. So this was something that was so alarming. And you reminded me of it when you said people adopt children for financial gains and different benefits.
True. True.
So I found out that, and I have to look this up to see if the numbers are still the same, but back in like 2014, 2013, if you adopted a Native American child, I think it was like a $22,000 or $29,000
Yep.
tax credit.
Yep.
So what was happening in the Midwest is people were in collusion with social work. So they have different acronyms in different states. Some said DFAC, some said DSS. It's different in different states. But they would have DSS workers go to these Native American homes and say the parents were drunk. These people drink a lot on their reservations, but they would say that they're drunk, they're unfit, and then the kids would be always adopted by a white family, and the families would do this adoption, the month before tax time, and once they file their taxes, they said the kids are unable to adjust or unable to adapt to their household, and and then they send them back to their original families. And they would
Mm.
do this every year. They'll get 2 kids and get $40,000, $50,000 in tax, in credits, and then send the kids back. So I always
Wow.
thought about that too. If you're not going to, be sincere and genuine with your intent for the child, don't do that, because it could cause more harm than good.
That's why when you asked that one particular question, my grandmother never let me. My mother, my biological moms.
Mm.
The last time I took my biological mom, it was my grandmother's birthday. I call both of them mama. So the conversation inside of my vehicle as I'm taking both of them to lunch is very crazy because my mom is answering to mom and my grandmother's answering to mama. So it's like, shut up, Clara. I raised the boy. So what? He's yours. And I used to get a kick out of that because they both used to be like, he's
Taking
mine.
ownership
My
of
mom
you.
like,
Right.
yeah, so my grandmother never let me see the fact that my uncle took preference so far as love over me. So when you get that, man, that's something special, man.
Mm.
That's something special. You may not say it. Miss London might not say it. Deborah, whoever's on, everybody else is on the program. You might not say this, and we might not. I'm veering off now. I'm veering off a little bit, but it has some significance in what we're talking about. Your early upbringing blinds you to that one particular person in a relationship you should have treated like a queen or a king, but you didn't. And now you end up getting someone that you're just going through the motions.
Mm.
You're going through the motion. And believe it or not, when you have, I wouldn't say trauma, because in my case it wasn't trauma. My case was I got lucky than a grandmother that just didn't say, I'm gonna rear you, but I'm not gonna love you. You said that to now, Mr. Mitchell. If you're not bringing both of them, if you're not willing to rear that child and give that child the love and the nourishment, might as well leave them. And I got lucky. My grandmother did that for me. Now, if you don't know what empathy is, love
Hmm.
and nourishment at the same time, it trickles over into a relationship because you become a more or less, we had in our hood, Mr. Mitchell, we are taught we're going to be better than dad. We're going to be better than mom. We're gonna work to get to a point. And you one of the biggest hot guys I ever known, man. When you fight about who's gonna pay for lunch and dinner. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So, when you get around people like that, it's like I remember when I didn't have a full nutritious meal. I remembered when my grandfather didn't have a job. My grandfather went on the ocean, crab, fish, oysters, whatever the season was. That's how he fed his family. But we know time has changed. Time has changed now. The kids want the Jordans. They don't even want a parent's love no more. Your only love comes measured by what you can give me. And you bring that into a relationship, believe it or not. Your early upbringing and how you're being reared now takes into relationships. You meet a woman, I guarantee you meet a woman right now, and all she want to do is mouth falls. She never wants to feel like she the need of her femininity should show. She always have this hard posture. Upbringing. You see a man, he want to talk down to a woman. He want to call her the B word, but he want to make love 5 minutes later. That's an upbringing. He saw someone do that, and he thinks that's the norm. But with me, my grandfather never put a hand on my grandmother. I've been with my wife going on 20 years now, and my wife couldn't tell you when I done beat her up. I done talked up under her clothes. Yeah, I still wear that crown. Now, I done some screwing up now. Don't get me wrong. I ain't sitting there like I'm perfect.
Right.
But I stood there and say, this subject goes deep and goes forever because you have to, ain't nowhere in the world you can buy a brand new computer and some of the things you input yourself other than Google that when you put it in, you put the first two letters in and the whole subject just about that you put it
Fear.
for
Mm.
pops up. And that's how life is. My grandmother taught me a lot of old fashioned antics, how to treat a woman regardless. I'm not talking about not cheat, not do this. I'm talking about how to treat a woman. Two different entities. Not making no excuse for someone who does it, but it's two total different entities. It's a grown folks entity, and it's a how would you like somebody to do your daughter? In a man's case, or a woman's case, it's a product you're putting out there in the community. And that's how my grandmother was. She reared me as a product she would like to put out in the community. She would like to have me treat somebody's daughter like somebody soon. You know.
You
Yeah,
thought about that?
uh, uh, oh yeah. Now don't get me wrong. Now don't get me wrong. I'm like say this jokingly, but some days I come home and I know if I do give myself a rating, I treat my wife real good. She treats me good. But you have them moments where you pull up the driveway, you just hope the ambulance coming to identify the body. You have them days. If a man or a woman say they don't have them days, my wife has them days too. Like, man, if I could just, my wife be gritting her teeth sometimes. Say, this dude get on my nerve. But
A friend of mine said one day, she said, some days you just wish you could kill somebody and bring them back to life just so they'll know not to be playing with you.
yeah, I had a brother of mine. He's so cruel. I mean, he's so cruel. We were cleaning up the yard, and my mom has cats everywhere. So
Hmm.
this cat, one of the cats just had a litter of kittens, and the night prior, I put him in a nice cardboard box, got the carpet, got the rug, got the milk. This clown don't even look in the box. You know, we're burning fire. You know how we do out in the country. We're
Hmm.
burning fire open. He throws the kittens in the fire, so I kept hearing meow, meow, meow.
What?
He kills the kittens. He kills the kittens. And I go up to him and say, man, God's gonna really take it to your tail. You know what this fool tells me? I only wasted one of their lives. They still got 8 more. And he thought it was funny, man. He said, they got 9 lives, man. They got 8 more, man. Why you going off on me, Frank?
Wow. Hey, I got a question for you, Frank. One of Lizzie asked, she wants to know, how has your upbringing affected you negatively? Like, what are some of your negative characteristics or behaviors that you can link to how you were raised?
Well, anytime you talk about behavioral questions, you have
Hmm.
to, you have to, you have to point yourself into the people you come encounter with, the people you care about, because the folks you come encounter with that you care about, they are your biggest critics. And my wife always tells me it's hard for her to come into me and get rational decisions because it's hard for me to let folks in, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So, so that's one of the negatives that I'm always making folks earn my trust. Gratefully, it's not violated, but I make sure they're earned. I don't care if blood cousins or whatever. I just don't say, hey, we're first cousins. You should willingly be respected of that person, but I make them earn it. And that's one of my bad points because a lot of good people don't deserve hard times just to get to know you.
Okay. So not unfair, it's not fair to them, but you understand why. For me, I think some of the negative things is I'm able to, well, I don't even know if it's negative, but I guess some may view it as negative. I'm able to cut ties and move on
Mm,
real quickly. I can say, you
mm,
know what, that this person doesn't exist anymore. That situation is past and move on. And I had to, I had to deal with separation anxiety. And I think
mm,
my defense mechanism was to just completely move on. I dealt with initially when the magnet schools opened. I had to move with
mm,
my grandparents because the buses didn't come that far out. So I stayed with my grandparents so I could catch the bus. And that was my first, I think, episode with separation anxiety from my friends. Because now,
mm.
I've been with these guys from preschool, kindergarten, first, second, third. Now I'm going to the fourth grade. I have to go to a different school. The very
Right.
next year, I moved to Boston, and my mom somehow trusted me. My mom left me at home alone a lot as a 10-year-old. And when I say home alone, like she left literally, and she would fly to DC and go to the Pentagon for a few days, and then I'd be at home. I knew how to cook, and walk to school, and I had to make new friends. So, starting over, I had mastered that at an early age, but I was also able to make friends. But now living with my dad has caused me to not trust people when it came to intimate relationships,
Mm.
because I saw a lot. I saw not just like with my dad, our house was a hangout spot. So there were a group of guys that were there every night. There were a group of women that were there every night. These people were married, but they weren't at our house with their spouse.
Mm.
And I saw this on a daily. So my level of trust was non-existent at one point. So it's hard for me to trust people. And I don't, and I'm like, look, as a friend or whatever relationship we have, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. You don't have to say things to me. You don't have to try to prove things to me, because I'm not going to trust it. I'm not going to trust you.
Mm.
I've seen too many things.
Mm.
So I think that's a negative to my upbringing. Liz, I hope that answered your question. If you can respond, or a thumbs up. Okay, she said it did, Frank. We answered
Mm.
the question. We have some other callers. He lifted me, Daniel, Sean, JMS is back. Welcome. Please, you can press one of the call-in buttons if you would like to chime in or ask some questions. And today we're discussing experiences with being displaced in your childhood. And when we say displaced, having been adopted, having to live with a family member, things like that is what we're discussing. So hello and welcome. You're on if you'd like to speak.
Oh, hey, how's it going? How's it going?
What's going on? How are you?
Good, good. I was just chiming in because I did hear you say that about feeling misplaced. You said
Yeah.
it? Is that what you said?
Yes. We're talking about experiences. If you've ever been displaced where, you were adopted, or like you had to live with a family member, parents dealt with evictions, divorce, whatever, just being displaced, and some of those experiences. How did it shape who you are today? What are some memories that you have? Did it cause any anxiety? How did it impact your development or anything?
I mean, I'll be honest. I think that for me, it's one of those things where it's kind of, I'm not gonna say I guess in a way it's biblical. You know what I'm saying? It's always told not to idolize people. And I live with family members that I thought were what love was, you know, and learned from that wasn't the truth. And now I think I'm more trying to find out what's real and what's not.
Mm,
And I'm sure there's a lot of people that's gone through that where you think that those certain people are, oh, this is the perfect. I mean, you see it all the time. You see it all the time. You see it with certain celebrities, even though celebrities have their own personal problems, but you see it as, oh, relationship goals. But when you really, it's one of them things like idols become rivals, but it's like not even a rival thing, even though it is kind of. I'm just realizing now, like a lot of things was possibly a facade, you know.
mm.
That might sound like I'm railing, my bad,
No.
but I mean, like if you
I get it.
think
I get
about
it
it, well,
completely. I get it completely. I
yeah,
remember having a cousin, maternal cousin. His dad had a really good job, and he had like toys and dirt bikes, clothing. He had everything, and we idolized it. But that cousin also committed suicide when we were adults. I think I was like 22, he was 24, and and I don't think it was well. I don't think he tried to portray something that was not there. I think my perception of it and the lens I was looking through, because in my opinion, he had the things that I wanted. His parents were together. His dad had a really good job. His mom had a good job. They owned a lot of property. My uncle had the van, the pickup trucks. You know, he had the experiences that I felt that I wanted, but there was a void in him somewhere. And a lot of times you just think that someone has it better or they have the things that you feel you want at that time. And the reality is we probably had the life that he wanted, or he would have sacrificed those material things for something else because he ended up taking his own life. So obviously it wasn't, you know, as glamorous to him as it was to us on the outside looking in. So I get exactly what you're saying.
And it could have definitely been an emotional act that he was, holding, because a lot of times when you have all of those material things, the emotional is what lacks, which is what's most important.
Right, right. And he was an only child. So there are certain things it's like you're never going to get to discuss unless you establish that relationship with your parents, you know?
Facts. And I mean, you got to think too. It's up to the parents too to also confess and own up to those type of things too. A lot of parents sit there and say, what's that infamous saying, like, do as I say, not as I do, or whatever that saying may be.
Right, right.
But, a lot of parents don't want to own up to their own mistakes that they may have shown or didn't know they showed to their child. Like,
Yeah, and that do as I say and not as I do, when what you're saying don't really add up either. So what you're doing, you're not setting the great
right.
example.
Right, like I started learning. Actually, I used to be told actions speak louder than words. I've been like all of this stuff now is. I'm not saying it's hypocritical because I did learn from it, but I think at the same time, if we're being honest, how many are owning up to what they've displayed or exposed that they are for love maybe or presenting that their child is mentioning now.
I understood the saying, and I agree with what you all are saying. It seems contradictory or hypocritical. But I also thought of it in an instance where people found themselves in a situation where they had to do something, where I have to do this. I don't want to do this. I found myself in a situation, and I'm giving an example where as an adult, you find yourself in a situation, I have no way out. I got a friend. I know he's hustling. I don't want to be a hustler, but this is who I have to turn to. Hey, man, I know you got these bills to pay. You just got laid off. It's Christmas. Your kids need food. They need clothing. I need you to drop this off over here for me. You can make $1,000. As a provider, you do it. But you say to your kids, hey, although you see me doing this, this is not the way to go. I don't ever want to see you doing this. I don't want you going on the path that I went down. I did this because I didn't do what I was supposed to do in school. I made poor decisions. I don't want you doing what I do. And I think that's the basis of, or an example of, when you're saying, hey, do as I say, but not as I do. And we all wanted, hey, let's lead by example. But as an adult and as a parent, sometimes we're faced with challenges and situations where we have to do things where we don't want to do it. We have to, but also we don't want our children following us on that path. And I know, okay, hello. We all have another listener coming in. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. And if you have any other questions, and Liz, thank you for your questions as well. That was a good one. And I have, okay. Liz has finally joined us. Hey, Lizzie.
Hey, it's halftime, so I can talk. I'm trying to watch the game.
Which game is on?
In the Georgia Tech.
Oh, I didn't know they were on tonight. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a good one. But anyway, I just wanted to just touch on a couple of things. I think the love and the bond that a child has with their parents, and in particular the mother, I think is oftentimes overlooked or underrated. I worked in a children's mental institution, and the things that were done to these children, I don't even want to repeat. It's just, some of the stories are just horrible. But no matter how poorly these children had been treated, if given the opportunity to go back
Yes.
to the people that had abused them.
Yes.
All of them wanted to go back home.
They love their parents. Mm-hmm.
Yes, they love their parents. And so when I hear about people that have grown up in the system or not with a biological parent for whatever reason, my heart always goes out to them because I know there's always this innate desire to have been with your biological parent, and in particular, more times than not, the mother.
Right.
And so that's why I asked my question, because I'm always curious as to the effect of not having done so has on a person, because I can be, like you said, empathetic. I luckily never had that situation, but I have a nephew that is adopted, and he's getting to an age now where we've always told him he's always known that he's been adopted. So it's never been a secret.
Oh.
And he's never really asked. And I don't know if it was because we got him at such an early age, but we always said too that we would be open to, if he gets to the point that he wants to try to find his biological parents, we're going to be supportive of that and do what we can to make that happen. He had a lot of behavioral issues for a long time, and we eventually got him. And I say we, I mean, my brother and his wife, but, they got him into therapy and everything. And so curious as to how much of his behavior issues, go back to knowing, because he looks nothing like us. Although I think, if you feed a child long enough, it will eventually look like you. So he's starting to kind of favor some people in the family. But so like I said, it was no big secret. It's not something that we probably could have played off even if we wanted to. So, I'm just curious as to how much of that being adopted, and I think also the reasons behind why you're not with your biological parents makes a big difference. I have a cousin who was put in the system because her mother is my first cousin, and her father abused her and her sister. Mm-hmm. And she ended up getting put in foster care, and she and her sister both have a lot of issues. But again, same thing as badly, and she was abused very badly. Like we ourselves called DFAC several times on my cousin, and she was about, I guess, maybe 4 or 5 when she was finally taken away. And when she got to college, she found us, and it's like she never left. She's there for holidays and everything. She has no relationship with her mother, although she's tried, but she's got a lot of issues from that. And I think her being abused and taken away versus my nephew who was given up at birth, I think the effect is probably there's a little bit of a different effect that has because of the circumstances by which you aren't with your mother. So, so I guess going back to Franklin, did it make a difference to you knowing that you were willingly, I wouldn't say given away because you were still in the family, but your parents willingly gave you up, versus you think if you had been adopted at, say, birth and then later went out and found your parents, do you think any of that would have had a different effect on you?
My queen, my sister, I don't think it would have had, because my search from a child to my adulthood right now, I've always searched in my grandmother for someone who gets me, if that makes any sense. The first time, so far as wanting a parent or wanting someone in a parent position to be mine, was my senior year when I was graduating. My parents didn't even come to my graduation, and they lived probably walking distance. So to your question, at my graduation, when they put my diploma in my hand, I was crying, and no one out of 200 something odd people who graduated with me, no one knew why I was crying except my grandmother. He said she could have came. She said, in reference to my mom, she said she could have came, baby, but I'm here with you. So being given away, short layman terms to your question, once you have a goal in what you're searching for, you don't let the negativity bring you back. Because I could have easily said, okay, if I was adopted, it would have been better than me not knowing. With me with me knowing, it hurt even more because now I would never find out why my mother did what she did. Because she's sick now. She has dementia. But I'm her best friend right now. I bathe her. I feed her. It's like God did everything perfect to make me who I am right now. I'm not bitter. I started off with one mother, which is my grandmother. And in the end, I found out I have two mothers that love me right now. So I didn't think it would make a difference to me. It wouldn't have made a difference.
And I want to be clear. I don't know if I said better or not. I didn't mean to say better. If I did say better, I meant different. Would it have been any difference? But I understand what you're saying.
Mindset. It's a mindset because think about it. I don't even know you from a can of paint, but picture this scenario I'm about to give you. What's the best way to get a bad relationship, a bad guy out of your life?
Leave? I don't know.
No. Hey, Miss Deborah, help Miss Lizzie out.
Deborah's party.
Wait, what y'all say? Hold on. I am at a party, but can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, what was I asked? I didn't hear.
The question is, what's the best way to get rid of a bad, let's say in you guys' case, what's the best way to get rid of a bad male in a relationship?
A bad male?
And if you're in a relationship, what's the best way to get rid of a horrible guy?
Leave. What do you mean?
Yeah, they all gonna say leave. That's what the answer to women have.
I don't listen. I don't get no horrible guys in my life. So
Yeah, you guys are correct. In lemon terms, you are correct. You find someone that's going to fit the quality and what you need. You get rid of him. You get rid of him. You get rid of him. So
I said leave because there's no way that I'm gonna invite no type of toxic shit stuff into my life, and there's no way that I'm gonna stick around in a situation that just like if I can't be happy on a day-to-day basis. Granted, there's gonna be those select ups and downs, but if the majority of this time can't be on a good uphill of like how we building, what we doing, you know what I'm saying, how can we make each other better, then I don't want to be there. And I'm not going to be there. And I will leave and I won't feel no way about it.
that's solid. That's solid. That's solid. That's 100. That's 100. So with me, I found so many positive avenues of approach to take. When I started growing up, I started finding out different things. Like, okay, my uncle is not really my brother. And then I started visiting during the summers, my biological. So I always found positives in just about everything I was doing because now it takes on a rim of how Miss Lizzie was saying, coming through a professional rims of seeing kids being abused. You take these things into your adult life. Now you're having problems in relationships. You're having problems at your job because you think everyone sooner or later is going to leave you. Nothing's positive. Nothing's forever. So you have to find the good things, and you leave. And like you said, Miss Deborah, the things that can't help you in your journey of success, you leave them alone.
So let me ask you this. A lot of times we have a hard time a lot of times letting things go because we get so possessive over them. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you can only possess material things. Something that has a heartbeat and a mind to think as an individual. You're the biggest fool to try to possess something like that. You just can't. We're not as human as I guarantee you right now, and I tell my wife this all the time. You could get anything out of me with kindness. And I leave it at that. I leave it at that. She could get me to jump off a bridge with kindness. But I result back to what you just said just now. The negative. You're not going to stay around and someone's belittling you every chance they get. You're just not going to do that. My grandmother when I was given to my grandmother welcomed me with open arms. Oh my God, she showed me love from coming to discipline me and I got in trouble at school. I mean, I wasn't lacking anything. Someone else who may have went through the same thing I went through may not feel the way I feel because they might have went somewhere and wasn't treated as good as I was. It just wasn't. My grandmother gave me a way out to not to think about the things I didn't have and and praise God for the things that you do. And I do that in my adult life. I mean, so what? I don't have a BMW. I got a Mercedes. You know, be thankful for what you have.
So do you think that with your mindset, do you think you're an exception to the rule? Or do you think most people are able to see things the way that you do?
It depends on how, my queen, it depends on how they were treated. That's my answer to that because I don't think I'm special. I don't think I'm unique. I don't think I'm better than anyone. But I think if you're constantly being treated genuinely, you will never ever in your life want for anything. My grandmother taught me morals, taught me that if respect would get me where my credit score wouldn't, where money in the bank wouldn't. So even though I have them things now in my adult life, they're not they're not my final virtue of where I want to end up in life.
So take yourself out of it then. Do you think most people are as resilient as you are and have your mindset? So I'm going to repeat the question. Do you think you're an exception to the rule? Do you think most people can and do move the way that you move? Or do you think that this is something, and I'm not asking to single you out. I'm asking because I'm trying to get a general idea of human nature as a whole. Because I don't think that most people view things the way that you do or can be resilient as you have been.
I agree. Because if I said anything other than what you're communicating now, I'd be so fooling myself because we wouldn't have all these different programs to rehabilitate to kids that have been abused.
Exactly.
If the majority of the, so I agree with you 100%, my sister. You're solid with that. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, and a lot of people, a lot of them haven't even been abused. The abuse is prevalent in our community a lot, but a lot of it is more emotional and neglect, as in maybe not being fed as much as they should, not getting as much emotional support as they should. A lot of these children aren't being beat; they're being neglected.
I want to say something right quick.
Yeah.
Why I think that Frank's situation is unique is that he was still by grandmother, right?
Yeah, still kind of in the nuclear family.
And he's in a nuclear family. And small world, Frank. Liz is in Atlanta, but Liz's dad is from Petersfield.
Get out of here.
Yeah, Frank grew up in Petersfield. Frank.
Oh, okay. Rebecca King is my grandmother.
Who's your grandmother?
Rebecca King, that had the store at the Post Office Road.
No.
Yeah, that's my grandmother.
Yeah, as soon as you turn into Petersfield Road, I'm in the cab. I'm right there. I'm right there in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mentioned that because Frank was like, I don't know you from a can of paint, and I'm like, you know what? You both have roots. And I'm sure your grandmother.
You never know who you're talking to now.
Your grandmother
who you talking to.
Played hopscotch together.
Hey, Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Them overpriced nonulators, but they were good. I had to have them.
But here's what I want to say, Franklin, and piggybacking on what Liz was asking, right? There was a time when I was in Boston, and I remember the Lakers and Celtics were playing in the final. My mom got upset. I was gambling. Like I convinced kids to bet on games, right? And when they lost, they didn't have any money, so they had to give me their video games. And one of the kids got my number, called my mom, told my mom. My mom tore my behind up, right? So my way of cooling off, I'd get on my bike and I'd go to the Y and play basketball. I was a scout. So we would like do different activities where we tie fish knots and different things. And I just wanted to get out of the house. And as I was going past this medical center, I stopped to watch the game, and a lady noticed a bruise on me and asked what happened as my mom spanked me. Not thinking anything of it. That happens every day in the South. She said, right here, just happened to stop to watch the game, man. And this lady went and got someone. They came in. They said, I can't go home. They called my mom, told her where I was, and they called my grandparents and took me away. And so my mom wouldn't be able to get me. They took me and moved me all the way out to another part of the state. And when I tell you, man, I was so afraid because I'm in a part of Massachusetts that I'd never been. I'm living in a group home with strangers that are working in shifts. So the guy that I met that day was gone. Somebody else worked at night, and I was in a bedroom by myself. And then this kid came, big old white boy. They were teenagers. I was like 11 or 12. Everyone else were teenagers. They were runaways. They were truant. They'd been getting high in school. And I remember going downstairs, getting a steak knife and putting it in my pillow and sleeping with my hand in my pillow. And I went down. My brother, when he was in Boston with me, he showed me how to get to certain places. And I went downtown at Harvard Square and got stuck with no money. I couldn't get back on the train. And I found a guy. He saw me on the streets, man, crying, lost. I'm downtown Boston on Harvard Square. No cell phones back then. No way to get in touch with my family. And this guy spotted me, and he said he wanted to make sure who I was and I wasn't running some game, right? He walked me to his office. I knew my uncle's telephone number, the same uncle that I ended up living with years later. He called him, told him what was going on. The guy, my uncle, told him who he was, and they made arrangements. And the guy said, hey, look, man, I'm in good shape. I could get him there to you. My uncle was like, well, no, if you can get him to New York to my brother, we'll get him home to Charleston. And the guy said, can you get back to that group home? If you get back, can you get out tomorrow? I was like, yeah. They don't, pay us any attention during the day. I can leave. And the guy got a ticket for me. And I went back that night, got my clothes together, and I left the next day. They didn't even ask where I was going, nothing. I left the next day, went back downtown, and the guy put me on a train to New York to my uncle, and I ended up coming home. So I think about being displaced. That was displaced in a situation where I was surrounded by strangers. And I think about the fear and anxiety that I was dealing with at the time. And it was completely different than being around family or being able to go home at any time you wanted to go home. I experienced both. And in my experience, it was so different than being in an actual group home, and surrounded by strangers versus being with family and people that you love. And welcome. We have several callers calling in, and we're just giving you all a little update. Today, we're talking about experiences from being a displaced child, displaced as in a juvenile detention center, displaced being in a group home, being put up for adoption, or having to live with a family member. If you have any of those experiences or questions or comments, please feel free. We welcome all of our callers, our Rambler, JMS, Frimpuma, all of our callers. This is what our discussion is for today. Liz, you had another question. Please go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt.
I don't even remember what it was now. I don't even remember.
Finding out that Franklin is your native, your neighbor.
We might be related. You never know.
Right.
You're right.
You
Well,
never know.
Yeah.
So that is something, because Frank, your situation was unique in that, like you said, you were taken to your grandmother 3 months. So you didn't have a sense of not belonging. And it's weird because you looked just like your grandmother and your uncle.
True.
So I can see why you felt like this was your family. Oh, one other thing, Liz, your pronoun from earlier, I was going to stop you and say something. When you said your nephew didn't look like you all, but you were like, they said you feed it until it looks like you.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is she saying it? Like he's an inanimate object.
No, not it as in him. It as in a kid.
I know.
Okay.
But, and I'm just saying this because, I'm being petty. And, with writing and scholarly writing, I had to learn the difference, like saying who or that or it versus them.
Mm-hmm.
And because, inanimate things, of course, we'll say it, but since your nephew is a human being, we're going to say feed them until they look like you.
Okay. Noted. I'll remember that next time I say that.
But that is something. So my question to you, because I'm curious about that perspective also, do you find yourself doing more to be inclusive with him or to make him feel, like, hey, you're one of us. We love you the same?
No, I don't do anything extra. I treat him the same way I treat the other nephew. I beat him the same way I beat the other one.
How old is he?
Well, they're 20 now. He'll be 21 in January, and the other one's
Okay.
22. Yeah. So, but when they were little, yeah, they're really close. So my nephew that we adopted, he was 2 when we adopted him. He just turned 2.
Okay.
And so his older brother was 3. But I think because of how I grew up, it's like you all know how it is coming from Petersfield. Everybody, it don't matter if you married in or you are 3 generations removed. Family is family. Like I got cousins that I still call cousins who've been divorced from my cousins for years. I still, hey, that's my cousin. That's my cousin. So in my family, once you come in, once we accept you, which is almost any and everybody, you're just family. So him being adopted had no bearing. The only thing that used to make me mad, there were a couple of ignorant family members who would make comments about his complexion. He is mixed. My sister-in-law is, her parents are from Guyana, so she's very dark skinned.
Okay.
And I know one time in particular, I got into it with my cousin, and you know this cousin, because he made a comment about why your sister-in-law go and get that high yellow baby, and I'm like, well, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had to be a certain color to be worthy of being adopted. I'm sorry. When did that become a criteria? So that's the only time I've ever really had anyone make any kind of derogatory comments surrounding his adoption. Everyone else, like he's just part of the family. There's nothing. Now, we did make an agreement that we wouldn't bring up willingly his situation unless he asked about it. Like we weren't, you adopted. Like it's not something that we were gonna keep talking about or bring up, or your mama's white, your daddy's black, or stuff like that. If he asks, then yes, we'll give you answers. But anything else, no. We just moved on through life like he came in, like he popped out the belly just like the other one.
Right.
So now I personally, though, I will be honest, feel that I think that I see a little bit of a difference in the affection that my sister-in-law gives the 2 of them. she's a little more affectionate, I think, with the older one. And I think that's because she birthed him. Plus she went through some complications before she had him. So he was kind of like, he was a one and done, and I think, like a miracle baby kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I do, there were some years where I would see, like, we would go out to eat and the two of them would be having their own little conversations and, but I don't even think it was a slight towards the other child. It's just an affinity that she had towards this one. And I think it was because of what she had to go through to get him, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah. Kind of like that old model car that you finally got off the auction that you searched years for. You're going to take care of that one a little bit more than the one you got off the showroom floor kind of thing, in a way. That's a little extreme, but you know what I'm trying to say.
No, I get it.
Okay. Yeah. So, but other than that, no, we don't, And then, of course, there could be some things going on within their home that we don't know about, that we're not privy to. Everybody, I don't care how close you are to them. If you don't live in the same home with them, I always see you don't know what's going on in their home. So I never profess to know for a fact anything. So, but from what I know and what I see, that's how it's been from my perspective over the years.
I've learned a lot from you all with this dialogue today, and it gave me a lot to think about and reflect on as well, and thinking about it from different perspectives. So you brought a different view for us. Frank and I shared, our experiences as being that person.
Mm-hmm.
But you gave us a lot to think about as far as the family members.
Mm-hmm. And I'll be I'm sorry, let me say this right quick before I forget. I will say this. When they told us they were going to adopt him, my reservations were that his parents had mental health issues. So I did tell him that I didn't think it would be a good idea, because with his parents having mental health issues, there would be a high probability that he would too. And that's a big thing to have to deal with, that a lot of people don't understand takes a toll on families. Mental health is a big reason why a lot of families break up. And knowing them, they didn't come across to me as the type of parents who would be able to handle that well. So my mother and I both, expressed our reservations. And they're like, well, we know what we're getting into and we're going to do it anyway. And I was like, okay, so I will admit I was a little hesitant in the beginning, but not because of the adoption, just because of the history that I knew the child would have. So.
That's something to think about as well. When you are taking these children on, how do you deal with and cope with? I mean, if children have disabilities, mental disabilities, physical disabilities, or just unseen disabilities. Children can have asthma, ADHD, different things that you'd have to deal with. Of course, you have to deal with them if they're your biological child, but in that case, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, exactly. So, and but again, looking at it the same way, like you said, it's the same with, if you have your own, you don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
But there's also, well, why would I enter a bet when the odds are stacked against me? For sure, out the gate,
Right.
So, but we've been lucky.
A lot to deal with.
Because he ended up being less trouble than the one than the biological one. I was telling him the other day, I was like, I was worried about you for a while. I thought you were going to be the one I had to worry about. It ended up being your brother. So, yeah.
Now we're down to, it's amazing how fast time goes by. We've reached the 2-hour mark. We are down to our closing 90 seconds. And before we get any questions, comments, I want to thank you all so much for your participation. I really do. I think that I enjoyed the show. I learned a lot, and that is my goal at all times. I wish that our listeners had the opportunity to learn some things as well. And I would definitely want to continue this conversation and speak with others who've been displaced or dealt with that and share some of their experiences. But anything that you all would like to share, ask, say?
I would like to say, Franklin, I think you should be a motivational speaker. And I say that because the way you express, what'd you say?
His perseverance.
Yeah, not just perseverance, but the way he communicates, how he navigates and deals with things. And the reason why I was trying to stress that whole, do you think you're the exception or the rule? You are an exception. And I think more exceptions need to have a better influence on those who, in other words, there are more people who need to hear what you have to say and to know that they too can get to that other side if they take your approach. Because a lot of people don't know